On March 31st, it's the debut of 40 for 40, and we're having some fun looking back at older episodes of the podcast where I take the opportunity to really get into why Transformers the movie is so important to me. Now, one of my greatest joys in hosting the Mike Seibert Radio Podcast is having the opportunity to connect with some of the amazing, talented folks who brought this incredible movie to life. Today, we're going back to July of 2020 and my interview with Flint, Dille, story consultant on Transformers the movie. But that's hardly the extent of his credits. In fact, that's barely the tip of the iceberg, and he wrote a book about it called The Gamesmaster, almost famous in the geek 80s, my life in the 80s geek culture trenches with G.I. Joe, Dungeons & Dragons, and the Transformers. This is The Road to 40, and you're listening to Mike Seibert Radio. Enjoy.
Adam West still didn't seem like much of a fight, but I just listened. After all, I was writing a scene in which a robotic Walther PPK was fighting a semi-trailer truck, and they were the same size in the scene, so it wasn't like I had the logical high ground. Anyway, we worked out an elaborate scene. Batman had prepped the battlefield. He'd rigged bombs in a building. I didn't think bombs would hurt Superman, but I was told, they'll keep him busy. It was a good enough answer. We moved over to our scene. I said I wanted Optimus's death to feel like Davy Crockett's death in the John Wayne version of The Alamo. I'd seen that movie when I was 5, and it became the centerpiece of my early childhood. Steve's friend hadn't seen The Alamo. Instead, the movie that inspired him the same way when he was a kid was called The 300 Spartans. And by now you've probably figured out that the guy was Frank Miller, and that the Batman comic book he was talking about was the 4th installment of The Dark Knight Returns. I've told this story a lot of times to a lot of people for a wide variety of reasons. Transformers fans love hearing about how Transformers the movie was created. I talk about it in lectures at the USC Film School because that scene is about something a lot bigger than Frank or Steve or I, or even Transformers and Batman. To me, it's about the incredible burst of creativity that happened in the 80s and in other golden, or silver or platinum, ages.
Full disclosure, that movie from 1986 just might be my favorite movie.
Wow.
No joke, because it's one of those things, you're sitting in a movie theater, 7 years old, 1986. It blew my mind in a way that nothing I had ever seen before. It just really resonated me in a big bad way. And what I've found is as I keep going back to it year after year, I keep finding things, new themes, new ways of interpreting things that, I didn't when I was 7 years old.
It is shockingly deep and layered. And we can talk about that, in the show. I mean, what's funny about it is that same thing happens to me. Usually when I'm watching it, at a convention or, like in the different environments that I'm in, it is a shockingly different film.
I've been waiting a long time for this. All talk, no shock.
And now, from the Emerald City of Seattle, it's the Mike Seibert Radio Podcast. Your home for pop culture, Transformers, independent artists, interviews, Transformers, and stuff and things.
Also sometimes Transformers.
And now, here he is, the man that's more than meets the eye, Mike Seibert.
Hey, welcome back to Mike Seibert Radio, powered by Poddex. I am your host, and today my guest is Flint, Dille, author of The Gamesmaster, My Life in the 80s Geek Culture Trenches with G.I. Joe, Dungeons & Dragons, and the Transformers. And while you might not immediately know his name, you certainly know his work and influence on some of the most iconic entertainment franchises in the world. For me personally, he's one of the authors of my childhood, and as story consultant, his voice helped shape a movie that's incredibly dear and important to me. It's a little film that you might have heard of called The Transformers, the movie. We'll talk about that and more, as well as his work as a writer, story editor, showrunner, and producer, working with legends in the industry from Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, all the way to Frank Miller and Jack Kirby, Gary Gygax, and why the 1980s were a true golden age of pop culture. Flint, Dille, welcome to Mike Seibert Radio. Thanks for taking the time.
Hey, Mike, I like that intro there. That's great. Now, because of you, like, everybody will know my name, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because this live stream's going to go viral, and it's just going to be everywhere.
I think they have it like on every open speaker in America, like outdoors. So if anybody's outdoors hearing it.
Very cool. So before we dig into the book and chat about Transformers and G.I. Joe and Visionaries and Inhumanoids and to say nothing about your gaming stuff, I mean, we could spend forever just saying, hey, who's Flint, Dille, and what's up? But we want folks to buy the book, so that's kind of what we're doing here. But before we get there, how's that pandemic quarantine life treating you down there?
Well, what's funny is I'm sitting in Southern California, and right now I got the windows open, and I got a helicopter. The window just closed. I live in Westwood, like right next to the Ronald Reagan Hospital. So whenever somebody gets delivered, it comes. I got to say, I'm not really bummed out about quarantine. I'm kind of liking quarantine. I've been very extraordinarily busy, so I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
Okay.
And the other thing that's great about quarantine is, everybody's quarantined. So I've had more like just good, conversations in a lot of cases with people I hadn't talked to in years. And a lot of them actually associated with the content we're talking about now, because the book's coming out, and it's like, figured, I got to like round up the gang, and there we are.
Awesome. So I first remember hearing of you putting out a book. I want to say maybe it was 2018, TFCon Chicago. You were doing a panel to close out Friday night. This is still amongst my top convention going experiences. You did this live commentary of Five Faces of Darkness, which kind of kicked off season 3 of the Transformers, and is kind of a sequel of sorts to Transformers the movie. But I remember there were a few times, because like you would we would watch a little bit, and then you would pause and tell a lengthy story. And then, I think it was over an hour, and we had gone maybe like 5 minutes into the show.
Most people didn't fall asleep, because we went pretty late that night. There was we didn't have to pick anybody up off the floor. There was, I think that went late. I mean, we were like at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Super late.
I had a couple of friends of mine from high school over there who hadn't seen me, maybe at reunions, but we hadn't hung out at all, since high school, but they showed up, or, we were in touch, and had no idea what had happened to my life. And imagine how bizarre it is for, some high school buddy to be seeing this room full of people watching, the Five Faces of Darkness till 3 a.m. And they stayed too.
That's awesome. And I bring that up because there were a couple times where you would drop these nuggets as you're telling these great stories, and stories that a lot of us as fans know already, because we've seen you at a number of conventions in the past, but you would say like, well, in my book that's coming out. And I remember I was there with a group of buddies of mine, and we all kind of like squeaked our sneakers and stopped. And then it's like that scene out of the original Ocean's 11, with Frank Sinatra, where everybody at the end just turns their head and looks towards the next person in line. And we were just really excited for.
Well, I hope the book lives up to it.
Well, from what I've read so far, I now granted I didn't get very far because I just recently got an advance copy. Thank you for that, by the way. That gave me an opportunity to kind of get a sneak peek of what I'm in store for.
Well, I just saw it. It like suddenly appeared in my life. It won't show up, and it suddenly appeared in my life. Because. You don't know. I mean, but with books coming out, it's weird. About 2 months ago, I got a galley. The galley had all sorts of problems. It exists so that you can fix it. And before that, my wife had read through it and she was just finding, like everything was wrong with it. So we spent, a long time fixing it. Then I went back in with my editor, who was a great guy and Tachi. And we went in and re-edited it again. And by the time it actually comes out, I don't even know what's in it and what's not in it anymore. It's like, it's exactly right in the movie. I mean, by the time it comes out, it's like, that seems to make it into the final or...
Well, what I've found though is so you've it's billed as a narrative memoir,
right?
So it's from your perspective, mostly chronological from what I can glean so far, and what I have found is that it maybe I'm sure being a lifelong writer, you've kind of nailed your narrative voice, but it's, as I'm reading it sounds in my head as if I'm at a TFCon or some other type of fan convention, just listening to you tell your stories. That's one of my favorite things of seeing you at cons is just hearing your stories.
Oh, no, great. I hope I was able to convey that, because it's a real different medium than when you're talking to people and when you're writing it down. Because when you're writing, you have lots of times to overthink yourself and double think you. And I mean, my objective was not to like prove I was Leo Tolstoy or something. It was just to simply tell the story as well and completely as I could, because it's very complex and it all kind of winds together.
Yeah.
Because I'd say the book's, probably 50% sort of, chronological memories of stuff. 25%, a lot of it's about writing, and a lot of it is about just the age. I got really interested in the idea of a golden age, because that's how I felt about that period.
Yeah. So let's jump off from there. What is what was the original inspiration for wanting to write a narrative memoir, and then why now? More than anything, what was the kind of inciting incident for that?
Well, I mean, what had happened was I'd been doing interviews, ranging from doing the commentary on the DVDs to a lot of print interviews about all these topics. Remember, Transformers was just one of them. Yeah. I'd have people coming over and interviewing me about TSR and Gary Gygax and D&D and all that. Then I'd have people wanting to talk to me about G.I. Joe, because I think I'm one of the few people that's on both the G.I. Joe and Transformer version of Toys That Made Us. And I probably could have ended up on the D&D version of it, too.
Sure, yeah.
And so what I would do is a lot of times, even when you're doing an audio interview, like you and I are just doing this fresh, but when you're doing an audio interview, people would send you lists of questions. And you'd answer, I'd answer them in text. And I'd just keep dragging these files into a Google Doc. I suddenly discovered I had like 150 pages, and people were showing up on Facebook asking about this stuff. I realized, and I go to all these conventions, I realized people really want to talk about this. And what I ought to do, rather than, because the thing you're always afraid of is there's a story in there. It was Frank Miller and I sitting at Comic-Con. Yeah. And there was some bitter drunk guy in the bar at the Westgate Hotel. I mean, it was probably a famous comic book artist, but talking about, I got screwed back in the whatever. I'll tell you what the real story was. And Frank and I were talking about how Gornish they look. We just thought, God, I hope I'm never that guy. And I asked Frank, I said, well, does that mean you can never talk about the past? Frank said, it didn't miss a beat. He said, no, you can when somebody asks.
Okay. All right.
A brilliant answer. And I felt, okay, there are all these interviews. And people are asking me all the time on Facebook, so I figured I'm going to tell this one time, and then I'll never have to tell it again. Of course, when you come out with a book, then you're telling half the stuff again 500 times anyway. But I wasn't thinking that far ahead, because I've never written something like this. I mean, most of what I write tends to be fictional. So that was really it. I just decided, I was sitting in an apartment in Paris, and it was kind of. I think I was answering one of the questionnaires. And I thought, all right, what if I were to make this book? What would I do? And then I'd audition all the chapters on Facebook, and let people read them and make comments and stuff like that. And then, not all of them, but I mean, to a point, I did. And so I'd figure out what people were interested in and what they didn't want to hear about. And most of when you're reading the book, you can read it from beginning to end. or you can read for what you're interested in. My goal is to, let you read what you're interested in, but get interested in things you didn't know you were interested, because it covers a very wide swath of stuff.
Yeah, that's for me as a fan, that's what I'm especially interested in, because like, I a lot of the stories, especially related with Transformers, I've heard a lot. So I'm excited to revisit those, but there's so much else that, I mean, like a lot of your gaming stuff, a lot of your stuff with interactive books, a lot of that stuff, that history that I just don't know about. So it's really exciting to get into that multi-leveled history.
Yeah, that was the idea, because I mean, it was just a hell of a ride. I mean, going from basically just getting out of film school to writing real movies, but I've worked on 4 TV shows, and I mean, it was just a really great era. And that's not to say it was necessarily that much better than the one that followed it, but there's something about the 80s that's speaking to people right now. I mean, even my kids, my daughter's 21, or I'm sorry, 19, and my son's 21. And they like that music from that period probably as, happily as they'll listen to music from now. Neither of them was particularly geeks for this stuff, because, it's like, I'm not, giving my son, Transformer toys and making him play with them,
Right.
But I think the era really spoke to him, and it was a time when it was really fun to be young, and like anything was possible. And every time he turned around, there was some new magic electronic device coming out, and everybody's getting their first word processor, but the world was still analog. It was just a great period. It was like kind of the best, of what came before and what came afterwards.
Gotcha. So the book is The Gamesmaster, My Life in the 80s Geek Culture, in the 80s Geek Culture Trenches with G.I. Joe, Dungeons and Dragons, and the Transformers. That is a mouthful, by the way. On
the actual cover, the subtitle is Almost Famous in the Geek 80s.
Okay, very good.
That title you have, I don't know where that came from. That is marketing for Amazon or something. But that's not what it says on the cover of the book, because I wanted something, because my life was kind of like Almost Famous. So, every time I turned around, I was there. You see, it says Almost Famous. I don't know what the culture trench is. Almost Famous in the Geek 80s, right there on the cover.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So that's how I will refer to it going forward.
Yeah, that one you get the signed copy, and I just like it because Amazon doesn't like to talk about the fact that you can actually buy a book. You can actually buy a book on paper, and I like giving the publisher and the little guys, the stuff. It's not like Amazon's going to go bankrupt this week. However, that having been said, the audiobook is now out on Amazon, and it's fabulous.
Yes,
strange experience listening to somebody read your life story and it's not your voice.
How does that come to be with, it gets transcribed into an audiobook through Audible. The narrator, by the way, is someone named Eric Michael Sumner.
He does a fabulous job. He's a big audiobook guy, and my publisher, because originally it started out I wanted to do it, right?
Sure.
And I realize, especially when listening to this guy, that it's one thing to write a book, and it's one thing to be able to talk. It's quite a different thing than to do an audiobook. And I mean, this guy's just got a great voice. He's got, and it's really funny to see how he phrases stuff, because a lot of it's like better than it was phrased in my mind.
Okay.
I mean, it's just it's been a really kind of fun, surreal experience, but he did a fabulous job. And that is a very good way to experience the book, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've honestly been doing a little bit of both. I downloaded it on Audible. I've been listening to it on my commute, and then what I do is I have gone home and then started reading from where the narration left off, and then bounced back and forth.
I think that's a new way to do a book. I've been doing that a lot on stuff lately too, and I kind of like it.
It's kind of neat, and it adds just kind of like a different fun texture to it. But again, his narration is fantastic because it really conveys your conversational style. it's the next best thing to narrating it yourself.
Well, it's better because I'd be stumbling over my words and mispronouncing things and rewriting stuff on the fly. I mean, he actually reads the book.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So as we said, that audio version is available now. You can get that on Amazon. It clocks in at a whopping 12 hours and 49 minutes worth of audio there. I
didn't even know I had 12 hours and 49 minutes worth of thought. I mean, it surprised me that it came out there because I was worried about it being too short.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the book clocks in just over 300 pages, like 330, I think.
Yeah, it's like 330, and it's like real pages. It's not some phony big type. It's let's see. I don't know. I'm on the appendix here. So without appendix, we're at 327 pages.
Nice. Very cool. So from there, since we are talking about the book and your partnership with Rare Bird Books, how does that come to be? Did they approach you? Were you looking for a publishing partner?
A lot of things happened simultaneously, and a lot of people deserve credit. It was all just a puzzle that was put together. But I just decided, because I didn't have a book agent. I hadn't really written a book in a long time, and I was writing it, and I was getting a lot of likes and people encouraging me and asking further questions. I was just, and at this point, I wasn't entirely sure I was writing a book. I was just toying with the idea.
Yeah,
because you just got to have that kind of project, right? And so I posted on Facebook, anybody know an agent that I could sell this book? How should I sell this? I really did that. Because I just wanted to, it's just kind of a social media experiment, right? Because this whole book is. And I mean, what are we on right now? And,
yeah, absolutely.
So old friend of mine who was quoted extensively in the book, Harriet Beck, said, "Oh, you ought to talk to Stuart Miller." Okay, and Stuart Miller's an agent who I'd known, only vaguely. I mean, I don't know if he remembered me or he faked like he did, but I certainly didn't really know him. But like from back in the day, from this period. And so I contacted Stuart, and he just slapped me upside the head a bunch of times, and said, "Okay, here's how it's got to work. Your grabber, your premise for the book, what it's about, a synopsis. You got to have an outline, then give us 60 pages, then give us marketing, the similar books, and give us who you think the audience is and how you plan on promoting it." And I mean, it was like, it was rigorous, right?
Yeah.
And Stuart was great. Okay. Meanwhile, on a parallel track, because that's the way the world works.
Yep.
I'm pretty nonlinear, and my life's pretty nonlinear. A friend of mine, Dan Vining, had published a book with Rare Bird. And Dan's done a lot of books. I mean, he writes like really great stuff. And so it's like, oh, good, there's a real writer, that published with this publishing company. And so Dan recommended me to them, and to Rare Bird. So some combination of Stuart and Dan, and we got the proposal over. And they said, we'll go with it. That sounds really great. And, it's a small publishing house. It's not like, but the great thing is they're still there, And
yeah,
what was great about Rare Bird, we set up a meeting. They said they wanted to do it. And we set up a meeting, right? And I went over there, and it's right next to, this will be lost to anybody not from LA, but if you can ever go out in the world again, it's worth seeing.
Okay.
They're right next to a place called The Last Bookstore in downtown LA. And, right now the area looks like they've been doing a lot of weapon testing and stuff there. But I mean, it's a really cool old area of LA. And so it's right next to The Last Bookstore. And I went upstairs, and I felt like I was in a film noir. I mean, if you told me they shot Double Indemnity up in the office where I was, I'd believe you. And it was just great. And then, I went to Tyson Cornell, who's the publisher. And he was great. I mean, he was like, sort of totally modern guy. And you're in there, and I feel like, oh, I'm a kind of a publishing, cutting edge publishing house. I like this. Because, you've got to put something cool on top of this book, or it just ends up being another, I worked on this thing back, and,
Yeah.
So they had a lot of, and Guy Intachi, who was the editor, was there, and Stuart was there. And we had this kind of, it was just a real LA noir meeting. That's the only way I can describe it. And I said, okay, I'm in the right place. Let's do it. And so, we just went from there. And I got Livio Ramondelli, who did Transformer graphic novel series with Chris Metzen and I, called Autocracy. And it's a very modern artist for Transformers. And so Livio did the cover, and we're off and running.
Awesome. I was going to ask you about that.
Was a really long answer to a short question.
No, that's fine. Honestly, and I was talking to some of my friends about this in preparation for this interview. They were asking me about my prep and the questions I was going to have. I'm like, I'm going to spend the majority of the conversation just staying out of the way. So it's like, throw a softball and just let it roll. I'm a huge fan of Livio's work, and when I saw the cover, it looks like his work, but it was one of those things where I was almost too bashful to ask him about it, because it's like, I think that's yours, but I don't want to guess wrong and offend you, that kind of thing. So I'm
Livio's great. Okay, let's just talk about Livio for a second.
Yeah, please.
Okay,
awesome,
start
dude.
here. He's like the nicest guy in the world. He's incredibly smart. He's young. He's aggressive. He's always doing something, right? Anybody who can work with Chris Metzen and I, ought to get a Purple Heart anyway, or a Bronze Star or something.
Yeah.
He was perfect. Okay. He is also, if you read his new book, and I forget the title of it.
The Killock.
Yes. He is. And
it's
really
phenomenal.
As a matter of fact, it was really depressing how good a writer he was, because he won't want to do anything with me again. But no, Livio is fantastic. I mean, he is the definitive guy right now. And what he decided, okay, the picture, tell me if this gets really boring. I mean, we can go on to other stuff. The picture is a shot that was actually taken, is the only studio shot taken of me in that period. And so a girlfriend was kind of standing right next to me. So we chopped her out of it. And, okay. And then we stuck it in, and Livio said, well, you always wear the sport coat and the shirt, so, we're going to do that. Sounds good. And we ended up with this weird, with this weird thing. And what's funny is, I think it was Tyson, somebody yesterday said, should have just had your son pose for it, because, it looks more like him than me. That's the other kind of funny thing about it.
Oh, that's funny, because it does have that distinctive, iconic Flint Dille look with the.
Yeah, I know. Well, Livio picked it up, and you never know what people pick up from you. He said, "Oh yeah, I got to put you in the sport coat and the shirt."
Yeah.
So I'm not wearing a sport coat today. I'm in particularly degenerate mode, but yeah.
Well, again, we're in pandemic quarantine mode, so it's.
We're in quarantine mode. There's an excuse.
There it is. It's all good. So we were talking about Livio, and he's been on my show before to talk about the Killock, which I believe just recently wrapped up. I think the last issue is finally on the stands. IDW got their shipping all squared away. So if folks have not picked that up yet, stop what you're doing and go out and get it, because it's phenomenal.
It's fabulous. And I'm Livio and I are trying to do something else, and I just hope he'll still want to be around, because boy, he's really grown. Really, in a lot of ways, and I mean this well of both guys. Being around him, they're very different personalities, but the energy's like being with the young Frank. They're almost the same guy.
Could you expand on that? Tell me more.
Well, they're both guys that are just right there and really into what they're doing and all that stuff. Very different expressions and personalities.
Sure.
Yeah, Frank was always, much more, kind of cerebral and all that, and also too, I was young at that point too, so it was it's kind of a different thing. But it's a lot of and. He's just incredibly disciplined. We worked with him on an Ingress graphic novel, worked with him, as I said, on the whole Autocracy, Primacy, Monstrosity trilogy. And that was like 400 pages. It was one of these things where Chris and I were working on a game called Diablo 3. I know I'm not supposed to talk about anything past the 80s. We won't do this anymore. But working on a game called Diablo 3. And Chris turned around and said, hey, you want to do a Transformers graphic novel? And I thought, I haven't done Transformers. I've done a few Transformer games since the day. I did the first Bay game and a couple other ones that didn't ship. They were really actually promising. And but it was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's Chris. Okay, I'll do that. And I can't remember if Chris knew about Livio or no, it was IDW. I think it was John Barber, but I'm not sure. One of the editors at IDW introduced us to Livio at Comic-Con.
Oh, okay.
And I looked at his stuff and I said, oh, this guy's perfect. But he's also just got the perfect attitude. And I can't say enough good stuff about him. Yeah, it's great, and I love the fact that he's growing himself and doing his own books too. The similarity is the passion and the energy. I mean, he just loves what he's doing. He's not one of these people, this is safe to say. He's not somebody who wants to be doing something else. Like, yeah, I'm doing these comics, but I really want to be doing movies. Mm-hmm. He's not, I think he just loves being Livio, and that's really refreshing. He's almost kind of like an 80s character who just like is in the wrong decade.
I got you.
Missed last week's episode? Have trouble remembering that hot take you heard? Find it all in the full archive on SoundCloud.com by searching Mike Seibert Radio.
Let me see, because I mean, there's a million different places we can go, and I want to make sure that we're economical with our time. More than anything, and this is probably self-indulgence more than anything, but Flint Dille, tell me a story about your portion of creating Transformers the movie.
Boy, there are about 50 of them.
Exactly. Okay. Now, and you don't have to tell me all of them. I'm just...
Right, which ones haven't I told you? Okay, you told the basic stuff. Because, I'll give you the outline, okay? And you can feel free to hit that fast forward or pause or, or rewind or something like that anywhere in this. But I'd only I started out on G.I. Joe. I was very happy being, associate producer on G.I. Joe and, and doing story editor and all and writing them. And G.I. Joe was always easy. But Joe and Tom said, okay, we're moving you over to Transformers. And, I moved over to Transformers. And Transformers was never easy. I liked it. And I'm really proud of it. I kind of loved it. But Transformers was just hard.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. But anyway, so I'd vaguely heard there was going to be a movie. Well, I didn't really, this is 1984, 85, whatever year this was, 85. I didn't really believe there's going to be a Transformer movie. Okay. Animated movies were extremely rare. And I always thought, you could actually project a lot of the episodes onto a big screen. And if you cleaned up all the shots, it would look pretty darn good. Yeah. Okay. And we got in the first draft of the script, and Ron Friedman wrote, it was a brilliant piece of work, and it was this warehouse of images and ideas. And I don't know if you've talked to Ron, but I mean, you talk about a guy with, extraordinary amounts of energy. And he comes at everything like, like some, outside linebacker on an edge blitz or something like that.
There you
I don't know
go.
what he looks like, but I mean, that's what he's like. I mean, he's just right there and right at it. But he was doing a script where he probably had 10 people giving him input, and it's like, oh yeah, we got 43 new characters. We got to discontinue 20 characters. And so the whole thing was, Jay and I shaping it. And Jay and I sat down and wrote a draft, which was not, it's not like we tossed out Ron's draft at all. That would be totally untrue. We used a lot of it, but we were trying to streamline it into a very simple story that we could tell. You could tell somebody in 30 seconds. And so we wrote a draft called The Secret of Cybertron. And we wrote it in a week. And Jay was living on my couch. And you'll see in the book, I always had someone on my couch. And Jay, because, it was just easier because we were working around the clock because we had to write a script in a week. And we came out with that draft. And I think, I don't know about Jay, but I was absolutely convinced that this was the best script ever written by anybody for any reason, and this would be in the Smithsonian. Well, nobody else shared my enthusiasm. And however, parts of Secret of Cybertron kept sneaking back into the script, and oddly enough, not from me, kind of from everyone else. But the story. Oh, there was one period that was pretty funny. I can't tell it. I got to figure out how to tell that. Sure. Okay, you'll see in the book. What I tried to do in the book is I don't say anything embarrassing or bad about anybody. Okay, and I don't know if it's embarrassing or bad. Let me say what was really fun was this one period where I was in New York rewriting the script, and I'm sitting in this swank hotel. It was, oddly enough, it was Donald Trump's first hotel. I think it was the Grand Hyatt.
Okay.
It was right next to the Sunbow offices. And at that moment, Griffin McCall was the fastest growing ad agency in Manhattan. So all of a sudden you're living in just this world. I mean, it was like Tom and Joe were like, they would have been the young guys in the room in Mad Men. Okay. Tom Griffin and Joe Bacall. Yeah. And these guys were fabulous. Just great guys. Joe just passed last year. Tom's still very much around and with us. And these are two of my heroes. And same thing with Jay. I mean, that's the thing I gotta say is how strong the creative team. I'll tell you an embarrassing story.
All right.
That was I was like such a prima donna and was having such a tantrum after they were less than just totally accepting of Secret of Cybertron. I was just like in a snit for a 72-hour meeting. There were breaks in it, but I mean, it was basically an entire weekend in the office in Westwood. And all I remember is lying on my back, smoking cigarettes the whole time, just being a complete pain in the butt. However, they didn't do the smart thing and fire me. And we got through it. I stayed with that script. I think I wrote probably 22 drafts of it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so there were a lot of ups and downs and nooks. Some of the drafts were pretty minor. It's like we would find out who we cast Orson Welles for Unicron. Okay, so we'll do the Orson Welles rewrite. We have Leonard Nimoy. Okay, okay, we know how to do that. It was stuff like that.
Interesting. I was already excited to check it out in the book, but now it seems like there's a lot of treasure there that'll be fun for fans to discover, because there's we were talking about this a little bit in pre-show before we went live. There's just something special about that movie that it crystallizes everything that's awesome about the 80s, between like the high concept animation, the prog rock soundtrack, the celebrity stunt voice casting. It was something that, I was 7 years old when I saw the movie, and I was sitting there, 7 years old. I got my Red Vines, I got my Dr. Pepper, and it just blew me away. Just blew my hair back in a way that seeing something on that scale hadn't before. And I had seen Star Wars. I mean, Return of the Jedi had just come out a couple years before that, and that captured my imagination, and it was, a tremendous film-going experience. But this was something, I think maybe it was because I was already a fan of the Transformers and had the toys and was invested in the characters, but it was something that just again made me gobstruck in a way that no other cinematic experience had been at the tender age of 7. But it's still the meter stick that I use for a TV show to movie progression, adaptation, things like that. I mean, we've seen Star Trek do it and other things like that. And my response is almost uniformly, yeah, it's fine, but it's no Transformers the movie. Because nothing before or since really moved the needle in a way that we had seen like that before.
Well, it's funny. I mean, how do I respond to that? But that's fabulous. What I will tell you is, and we touched on this briefly, but I had more thoughts about it, before the show. But every time I've seen it since then, it's been a little bit different. Because as I said, I don't like to sit down and say I'm going to go watch Transformers the movie. Yeah. I mean, that's really narcissistic. But I've done it at a lot of conventions, and it's gotten to be a thing where people want to watch it, and I'm sitting there with the remote control unit and telling stories and all that. Which, by the way, was pure research for the book. It was. Right. What do people ask about? What they want to hear about? When do I see people nodding off? And stuff like that. Anyway. And I remember one time I went to saw it over at, I'm trying to remember, the Cinegrill, which was basically, imagine if you took a Hollywood bar, a disco, and a theater and, compressed them all into one room. You had booths and it would be like watching a movie in Las Vegas or something.
Sure.
And that time, in that context, I was struck by, the Stan Bush, Vince DiCola soundtrack. And I realized how 80s that was. You listen to that soundtrack and, Ronald Reagan's still president.
Yeah.
MTV is a brand new thing, and Miami Vice is still on the air. You listen to that soundtrack and it brings back, the Stan Bush and the power ballads and the touch and all that. And Vince DiCola, who I never realized how prog rock he was, because I was just raised on it. So I was used to Yes and, and
sure.
And Emerson, like Palmer and Asia and, that was like second nature to me. And I didn't realize, he did a movie that has a prog rock soundtrack. And it was just it was one of those nights where everybody was having a really good time. And I mean, it was sort of like it was one of these big, happy, drunken nights, except nobody was drunk. It was one of those nights. So that's how the Transformer movie looked that night. It looked like a party movie. Then another time I went to see it at the Egyptian Theater. They had a screening. And it was a much more kind of cinematic experience where they had a panel ahead of time and we sounded, very intellectual talking about this, talking robot movie, right? And, but I mean, it was very artiste. And so I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm struck by what Nelson's stuff did. And Nelson Shin, the director. Okay, Nelson, what an epic guy that is. He is, and I didn't realize how many decisions he made that were just like 3 trillion% right. I mean, who figures out that? How do you show a giant robot died? Well, make him go in black and white. I mean, who thinks of that? If you look at nothing but what Nelson did with color, and then go take a look at the scenes inside a Unicron.
Mm-hmm.
And if that were not a Transformer movie and you weren't hearing, Chris Latta, you weren't hearing any of that stuff, and Orson Welles, you weren't hearing any of that stuff, that would be an art film. I mean, just look at the images. That would be an experimental, avant-garde study in color and technology and living, I did feel like an intellectual that time I was watching it. That's what I'm saying. Every time I watch it, I see some scene, and it may have been, some scene I wrote, but just seeing it, it kind of like, strikes me as, kind of like, wow, yeah, I didn't see that coming. I mean, it was a really interesting movie, and partly was, we had Star Wars, but that was already a long time ago. But the intrinsic challenge of the movie that we had 134 speaking characters in that, and all of them were product.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not to mention the fact we were killing characters off, which I could argue. I mean, I would argue we wouldn't be having this conversation if we haven't, and I believe that argument.
Yeah.
The other side of it is I realized we kind of violated our contract with people, in that the thing that was great about a lot of those 80s shows, by Transformers and Joe, is we could do very violent stuff, but nobody actually died.
Mm-hmm.
It was safe. It was a safe experience. Even in Humanoids, which is about as dark and violent and nasty as you could go in those days, nobody actually died in there. And then the movie, shocked people because we sort of broke our contract. And as I said, I can argue either way. And I think in the end, it was the best thing for the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand the other side of the argument too.
Yeah, a couple quick places I want to go with that. One, I think it's the part of what makes it so lasting is that it does play for keeps. It's like those Foolios on the shuttle are not coming back. That kind of thing. And I just remember. A lot of folks point to the death of Optimus Prime as kind of like a iconic moment. And it was iconic for me as well, but I had already seen Wrath of Khan also. So
right.
I was already kind of accustomed to the perspective of heroic death and sacrificing for your friends. Even at 7 years old, I could still kind of appreciate and understand the morality of that. I think some of the other violence is I think more striking to me than that. And that actually kind of brings me to a question I got from one of my buddies, Stan Cho, who's a pixelated Transformers artist. He's going to be a guest on my podcast soon.
Oh, great.
But he just wrote to me and says, like, I have a question. Can you ask Flint to describe the quote-unquote gauntlet scene that was cut from Transformers the movie? I want to hear exactly how he wrote the deaths of the other 84-line Autobots.
Okay.
I would really appreciate if you could do this.
That was the big scene.
Yeah.
That was the big scene in Secret of Cybertron. Okay, the premise of the Secret of Cybertron, and someday I hope to find a copy of that script. Like, just turn up. Like, I just found in my closet a while back. That is the first 2 episodes of the second season of Inhumanoids that never aired.
Oh, wow.
So there are weird anomalies in my closet somewhere. Okay, here's how I remember it. What we decided that, okay, we've got to, we're discontinuing the 84 product line and we're doing the 85 product line. This is Jay and I.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, well, let's have a really magnificent, it's like the Charge of the Light Brigade or the Alamo or something. Because, and you'll see in the beginning of the book, I mean, I always thought of Optimus's death as being Davy Crockett, John Wayne's death in the Alamo, in his version of the Alamo.
Yeah.
And that was the whole discussion with Frank. And you're saying, did you ever see the 300 Spartans? So it said, yeah, this ought to just be, this is this valiant death, and they're all going to get killed, and they're all going to sacrifice. Because the premise was that what the Autobot Matrix really did was it was a key. And when you got to the heart of Cybertron, you could awaken Cybertron, and it transformed, and it was the only thing that could defeat Unicron. So literally there's a battle between these 2 planet-sized giants who are brothers, which oddly enough channeled into later comic book interpretations. But basically what it was, is just think of it as you're making a dead run to the center of the planet, right? And you've blown open a shaft, and the Decepticons are trying to defend it, and the Autobots are trying to attack it. And it's just this mass charge. Everybody's getting picked off, and one guy gets in there. It's very kind of Star Wars, really.
Oh,
so we didn't think about it. Our model was the Charge of the Light Brigade.
So this was going to be at the end of the movie, not at the beginning.
No.
Interesting.
No, that was not exactly the end of the movie because it didn't entirely work for him, and so the new characters had to go in and fix it.
Got it. Okay.
They had to be finished off, and that's where we're like Rodimus, Hot Rod at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Hot Rod, and I think Ultra Magnus is already dead at that point, but, Hot Rod and Cup, and, the new characters go in and literally pick up the torch, pick up the Matrix from where the old characters had failed and finish the job, and that was the end of the old and the beginning of the new.
Wow.
As I said, I thought that was a really cool idea. Nobody else did, but no, Jay did. We thought it was a cool idea.
I'm not gonna lie, I really dig that.
Well, that would be a great thing to do sometime as a comic, or like an alt version of an episode or something. It'd just be kind of a cool thing to do, because it really is this moment. Because I always thought of Cybertron as being alive and robotic. You would imagine all these things come from a planet that itself can transform. And I'd always bought every version of the origin story, and I figured the Quintessons just designed this giant robot that would build itself as a planet and then build everything else that's on it and then curl up in a ball. But they wanted the key for that lock because they didn't want that thing to suddenly appear.
Gotcha.
But there was the prototype, or there was the one that wasn't supposed to exist, and that was Unicron. That was my theory about it, because I just want to see these 2, planet-sized, robots fighting with each other, with ships flying around, things exploding, and all that.
That's wildly fascinating, and it's interesting how elements of that kind of ended up being part of the fiction later. Where they would have Cybertron as the body of Primus and be an opposite number of Unicron. So it's interesting how those elements kind of get picked up and used.
Well, my feeling is very few people ever saw The Secret of Cybertron.
Sure.
I think the distribution list was probably Jamie, probably Doug Booth, Roger Slifer, Joe and Tom, Jay, Carol Weitzman, and Hildy Mesnick, and that was anybody that ever had it. It is more likely that I have it stashed away somewhere, because if Joe or Tom had it, would have turned up by now. And those things are pretty disposable. So I hope there's some box in the closet. You can't see it because I have my silly Batman, some box in there that has it.
Very cool. Well, the next thing I wanted to ask you about, and we'll probably end up getting close to closing out on this. We wanted to revisit and talk more about Five Faces of Darkness, because that's basically we started the conversation with that, and it's the sequel of sorts to Transformers the movie. Again, we are talking to Flint Dille. The book is The Gamesmaster, Almost Famous in the Geek 80s. It is available in audiobook form right now on Amazon and Audible. You can go check it out there. You can also pre-order a autographed copy through Rare Bird Books. There's a link in the live stream. You can click on that as well. That comes out in hard copies on July 14th. So you'll be able to hear expansive versions of some of these stories that we're talking about, and so much more that we won't have the opportunity to touch on. For example, I had a buddy of mine. I was just doing Facebook posting saying like, hey, I'm talking to Flint Dille about the book. It's so awesome. And my buddy Andrew, he writes me, he's like, what books did he write in the 80s? And I'm like, I don't think he wrote so many books. It was mostly like cartoons and games. I mean, gaming and video games and all that stuff is so much part of your history, where we're talking mostly about Transformers. But I guess very quickly before we pivot to Five Faces and close out, anything you wanted to touch on with regards to I'm just realizing that I'm snapping open too large of a can of worms, but
I'll try to get in under a minute. You mean all the other stuff in the book that's not Transformers? Because all the Transformers stuff is there. All the hits are there with Transformers. You'll see all that. Though your friend asked a really interesting question about the final assault, and I'm just reconstructing, because remember, I haven't seen the script in 35 years either. Right. I'd love to reconstruct it for a graphic novel or something. But anyway, okay, with the rest of the book, it's really it's about 4 years of going from getting out of film school. I went to USC, and it's this whole journey for working at Ruby Spears, meeting Jack Kirby. I mean, it's a bunch of people. I mean, I just, that's why I was calling it Almost Famous. It's like I'm hanging around these epic characters. I mean, and you went through a number of them at the beginning of the show.
Yeah. But
there is all these epic characters, and they were just great projects. And the books that were kind of forgotten is Gary and I wrote 4, basically fight a path adventures. Pick a path adventures were really big then. We did the Sagard books, which you can see. I'm sitting here. I have a 4-sided die in my hand. I'm playing through the Sagard books because I'm trying to figure out how to re-release them on a pad format.
Okay.
And they're really good. I mean, I'm playing through them, and I'm enjoying them. Now, granted, it's me, but nevertheless, I'm enjoying them. Then there were the Agent 13 books that Dave Marconi and I wrote, which, have as recently as like 2 years ago were in development. I think they maybe end up being back in development. And, there was Charlize Theron over Universal, and they went through a lot of writers and scripts, and we're trying to make that work. They get Agent 13 as movie. Dave and I wrote those then. Dave later went on to write Enemy of the State and Live Free or Die Hard. And just wrote The Foreigner last year, and has a movie coming out this year. I mean, did a lot of stuff. So that was another thing. Then there's kind of a funny story about doing my first interactive Laserdisc game with 2 supermodels in a bar in Greenwich, Connecticut, one of whom ended up being the editor of the third Agent 13 book, Patty Detterman. And then what else is in there? And it finally ends up, when Sunbow kind of dies and I go and do Garbage Pail Kids. Uh-huh. There's some great disasters in there. You get to, George Lucas is in there, the Garbage Pail Kids is in there. And then it ends up with when I go to the right party on the right night and end up end up writing a Steven Spielberg movie. And that's like, and now here's the kicker on that. If you look at the people who, this is what's not evident to you, but the people who wrote the blurbs, it's a fascinating collection of pillar. I mean, Frank Miller wrote one, because he and I hung out through almost all that period. Linda Wolverton, who was my girlfriend at that moment, went on to write Beauty and the Beast and Lion King and all that. She's got an interesting blurb in the back. Paul Dini, who basically has defined Batman, for animation and created Harley Quinn. And we're still doing it. I mean, I was talking to Paul for an hour and a half yesterday trying to figure. Oh, that's another thing. Paul and I found a thing we wrote in the day that we're going to figure out how to develop as a comic book. And Luke Gygax wrote a blurb. Chris Metzen, and Chris Metzen is the creative lead at Blizzard, who did Diablo, StarCraft, and Warcraft. I mean, unbelievably accomplished guy. But it's just really cool to have all these people. Because I've just been kind of hanging with them for this last period. One either virtually or in emails and all that. It's kind of like the 80s has come back. All right, that you've now heard most of the rest of the book. But the book's partly a book about writing. It's partly about a hero's journey. From noob who I graduated from SC Film School, and it's like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? And that's what happened.
No, that's awesome. And I wonder, I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about timing, and it is oddly serendipitous. If there's any silver lining to this whole COVID pandemic quarantine stuff, is that I'm seeing this across the board where folks that haven't connected in forever are reconnecting. Like we're talking over Zoom and doing live streaming. I've seen longtime friends get reconnected, and it sounds like that's very similar to some of the stuff you've been doing as you've been ramping up the, like the Con to Couch stuff, the YouTube series. It's just great stuff.
It's been great. I mean, like I just found, I'm hoping he's going to be on tomorrow. I just found Rick Merwin. Okay, I hadn't talked to Rick Merwin for like 15 years. Tomorrow's Con to Couch show is about Inhumanoids, and he was the only, Buzz, I think, adapted one, and Rick Merwin wrote one. And so he's the only other living person that wrote one of those. And he did G.I. Joes and Transformers, and I think he even wrote My Little Ponies. Rick could write anything. He even wrote Gems. I mean, I think he wrote for everything.
That's
anyway,
awesome.
we just fallen out, and I found some antique email address for him, and I said, well, I'll just write and see whether he responds. And sure enough, he responded.
Well, and
that was another book series. We did a book series called Agents of Fortune, and that's another thing I want to talk to him about. Yeah, but yes, this is very much a period of reconnecting with people, and it's partly because of COVID, partly because of the book, and partly because, I don't know, at some point, that's what you want to do with your life. I mean, these are some of the most valuable and important people in my life. Why am I not talking to them every week?
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of that magical 80s time again, where just like it's 2020 feels in a way. I mean, I was 7 years old, so I don't have that much perspective, but it feels like this is a time that will only exist now.
Yes.
And I feel like
it's not all bad. As bad as people don't like being locked up, there's quite a bit I've enjoyed about this period.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of the tone and spirit of what you're telling in the Gamesmaster, in that, like, that 4 or 5 year period during the 1980s is a golden age of pop culture that really we hadn't seen before and might not see again. I mean,
if there's one thing that I hope I accomplished in that book, it was that, and it was that giving a sense of what a golden age is. You have special places, you have amazing collections of people, you have great projects. I mean, it's because I'm trying to figure out how you create them. Mm-hmm. You can't just wait around for them to happen. And this could turn into one. Obviously, there's a lot of nasty in the world right now.
Sure.
And that just didn't exist then. And I was trying to explain to my kids, I mean, the world doesn't have to be like it is right now, where everybody's yelling at everybody. I mean, it just doesn't have to be like, and it wasn't, and it wasn't like that world didn't have problems, that at that exact moment, the Soviet Union was either going to blow up or it was going to collapse.
Yeah.
We got lucky, but it could have gone the other way. But anyway, enough of that. But so that's a little bit of what it's about, is sort of at a personal level and a cultural level, how do you get a golden age?
Gotcha.
And then, and obviously I started writing this 5 years ago, so I wasn't thinking about this period when I was writing.
Yeah, it's again, it is. I'm just blown away by the serendipitous nature of it. So as we close out, because again, we did want to touch on Five Faces really quick, because you had some really cool thoughts that I thought were worth exploring. So take us there. The floor is yours. Let's talk.
Real quick. Okay, this is sort of one of those bucket list projects, like if I die and haven't done this, I'll be like, some part of me will go, hey, I just died without getting that done. But I would love to see Five Faces Darkness done properly, because it was done, it was written, when things were still good, but it was produced in the period after the movie. And what you have to remember is the movie was considered a disappointment at the time.
Right.
Nowadays, and 40 years of product later, people don't think that, but at the time, that's what they thought. And so the third season, things were fraying between Sunbow and Marvel, and I'm not blaming anybody. You'll find in the book like zero blame. I try not to say anything bad about anybody because I don't even remember most of that. and there weren't really villains, but that was a frayed relationship. The animation came in crappy, the deadlines got pushed, the budgets got cut. We pretty much knew, probably by the time, we were finishing that season, that the toy show era was over. Mm-hmm. I would love to go back and make it a true, kind of companion piece to Transformers the movie, because that's how I thought of it. Mm-hmm. I thought of it as a sequel for Transformers the movie because it bridged across. And then what would be really kind of cool is to fill in the space. I won't get into that. But there are things left to be done.
Absolutely.
And if we went back, cleaned it up, added a couple scenes back in, edited some stuff out, gave it a better continuity, it would be like having a sequel to Transformers the movie. And I think if we tightened it and polished it enough, it would be as good. That's what's funny about it.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be something? So,
I pitched that to Hasbro. They look at me like I'm on drugs, but I mean that would be my goal.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But that would be just a cool project, and probably doing the whole thing would be about the price of an episode of another show. And I think you fix the music. I mean, go get Vince Scola or somebody like that.
Yeah.
To do it. I mean, you do it and you say, we're really going to do this like it's a bookend. Mm-hmm. For Transformers the movie, not like it's the opening miniseries, because a lot of the material in that was stuff that if it was never in the actual movie script, it was stuff stimulated by it.
Very good. I love that. So let's look forward to the future a little bit, because something that happened last year, it was announced at San Diego Comic-Con, was the War for Cybertron Unicron figure.
Right.
That successfully funded through the HasLab crowdfunding program. And I remember Ron Friedman posting aggressively at the time saying, like, if this thing funds, I'm gonna get Flint, Dille, and we're gonna do something Unicron related. Well,
we've been talking about it. Ron and I are back when you could still go to a restaurant. I get together with Ron, and we've been trying to figure out what to do. You know what I mean? Because we want to do something. That was a great experience. The guys at Hasbro are fabulous. I've just spent a lot of time with these guys, and they're just great guys. And so the whole idea is what Unicron thing can we get done, and that may not be separate from figuring out properly how to redo Five Faces of Darkness. Mm-hmm. And I don't even care what medium it's in. And the thing is my favorite object in the Transformer universe is Unicron's head floating around. I don't know why. That's my favorite thing. And I ordered my Unicron. And my wife is horrified by the concept that a 3-foot wide Unicron may be showing up in our house. I said, I think it'll look good in the living room. I did not get a wife with any patience for that stuff.
I understand.
If she has her way, Unicron will be under the floorboards or something.
All right, very good. Well, Flint, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time and indulging me stories about my favorite movie. I really appreciate that. The book again is the Gamesmaster, Almost Famous in the Geek 80s. Download it on Audible now. Listen to the audiobook. It's really very good. You can, if you want an autographed signed hardcover copy, you can get that through Rare Bird Books, and that pre-order link is available now. The book drops on July 14th, and you can pick it up on Amazon as well. And before we part ways for now, can you let folks know where we can connect with you on the internet and the social medias? Usually if you want to get hold of me, as you discovered, Facebook's the place to do it. I'm not really a Twitter person. It's just not smart enough to understand it or something. And I mean, I have a Twitter account, but I friend me on Facebook, and you will see more than you wanted to about the 80s at this moment. Until July 14th, I'm all 80s all the time. Well, and it's interesting. I mean, every once in a while I talk about something that maybe happened in 91, but mostly we're 80s, Well, because when you and I corresponded recently, you'd shared that you're basically in promotion mode, for the book, and I had some of my friends, other content creators, come to me. They're like, "Oh my gosh, how'd you score that interview?" I was like, "I asked." I'm like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm incredibly findable." I mean, it's like, and like you can pick any one of the subtopics, and I can blast mouth about that or bring friends or whatever, because we've been doing, I've been trying to learn this medium with the Couch to Con stuff too, and so it's I like it. I find this a really good streamcast, really good medium for it. So. Yeah, I mean, it's so much fun for everybody. We as content creators can connect with other creators easily, and it's just so much fun. So again, Flint, thank you so much for taking the time. Before we part ways, anything I may have not mentioned, any particular shout outs with regards to promotion of the book, anything that you've got coming up? No, I mean, you've been like incredibly great about the shout outs for the book. Are the things coming up? I guess the key I would look at is look at the people who did the blurbs in the book, and like most of them are people I've been talking to about some future project. I have a super secret project coming out in August, hopefully. Yeah, everything's hopefully, but it's a lot of this. What I will say, the COVID period's been the most productive period for me, probably since the 80s. It's been a very parallel period. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Very good. All right. Well, we will leave it there for now because I know you've got other arrangements. It's a busy time. Yeah. First thing I got to do is call back Rick Merwin. He called while we were talking. I haven't talked to him since. I think Bill Clinton was president last time I talked to him. So, and I'm trying to get him on Couch to Con tomorrow. So, but also too, I mean, if you want to talk about other stuff, just I can come back. It's not even going anywhere, right? Yeah. Absolutely. I'd love to have you back on. We can, I know I've got a buddy, Aaron Head Moss. He runs a G.I. Joe podcast and tell him I love talking about Joe. Nobody ever talks to me about Joe. Yeah. Right. I mean, I always talk about Transformers, and I love Transformers, but after all, I'm Flint, right? Of course. I want to talk about G.I. Joe. Nobody ever asked. The book is the Gamesmaster was an episode of Joe I wrote, right? Exactly. And I almost feel like I'm letting down some of my fans also because like I've got a bunch of buddies that are super into Joe. I love Joe also. I just happen to be a Transformers guy just a little more than Joe, so I can't overlook my own personal bias there. But yeah, no, we'd love to have you back on and talk more and maybe even talk a little Buck Rogers. There's a topic we totally missed, and Buck Rogers was like central to this thing. I mean, it's like been this weird, he's been this frenemy that's been really around all my life. That's a good way to put it, and I think that's an excellent tease for next time. But that will do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for watching and listening and participating. And if you want to listen to my podcast, subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to check out the full show archive, that's available out on SoundCloud. Like, share, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you like and what you'd like to hear more of in the future. Mike Seibert Radio is produced by Dave Sanders and is powered by Poddex. For Mike Seibert Radio, my name is Mike.
And my name is Flint, and we're signing off.
And until next time, wash your hands and make good choices.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Mike Seibert Radio Podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching at Mike Seibert Radio. Email us at mikeseibertradio@gmail.com. The spelling on that, of course, is SEIBERT. Call into the voicemail hotline at 231-224-MIKE. Once again, that's 231-224-6453. Special thanks to Michael Geisler for our theme music. For more like it, check out ByDoorMusic.com. This has been a Mike Seibert Radio production.
Next time on The Road to 40, you'll meet an incredible artist who left us far too soon, but whose passion for the Transformers the movie will never be forgotten.